Good morning again. Hate to break up all of your conversations, but we really need your attention up here. So, we're all in favor of networking, but sometimes we just have to stop and have the program. So before we begin the next panel, I would like to introduce Craig Hall, Deputy Director from the Massachusetts Developmental Disabilities Council, which is one of the sponsors of this conference, and a very high-performing agency at that. So, Craig?
We're all friends here. You don't have to, no pity applause. Thank you, Mark, for that. And, of course, we want to thank the National Center for Public Performance in Suffolk University for inviting us here. We want to thank you very much for that. And in addition to thanking Mark, we want to thank Mallory Sullivan. Where's Mallory? Oh, she's taking pictures. Thank you, Matt. Get my good side. We were invited here because we, as Mark said, we try to do a lot of innovative work in our particular agency. And if you hadn't have a chance to go to the table over there to talk to the folks about DD Suite, I think anyone who does grants, whether you're a government agency, nonprofit, or a foundation, if you're a grantor or a recipient, it's a system that's been pretty innovative and it's currently used all across the country. And when we talked yesterday about measures and spending and linking all that together, and as Mark Amos just talked about outputs and then the outcomes, if you're dealing with grants and grant funding, this is a system that might be worth your interest, and please go over and do that. I'm glad that Brian's not here. Brian Elms is not here. If his card is in the basket for the drawing, I promise you it won't be in there any longer. To take a moment, put your card in there. There's a beautiful poster of Tom Brady. They told me I couldn't take it home, so I would appreciate if someone would win that. And I think the last thing is just to say, again, thank you. The network has been fantastic, and I've met a lot of great people, and I'm looking forward to attending this next year. Mark, thank you.
Maybe she wants to come closer. Come closer. So I'd like to introduce the next panel, which in your program says panel 5, but it's really now panel 4. So, if you're confused following the program, you're in the right place if you look at it at panel 5. But I'd like to introduce Bethany Blakey, who will chair this panel. She has 20 years of experience in state, local, and federal government. She was neighborhood policy coordinator for the mayor of Pittsburgh, sole staff overseeing operations and capital projects for the Stadium Authority, the city of Pittsburgh, and presidential management fellow for multiple agencies in the Department of Justice, co-led the vice president's crime mapping and data-driven management task force, deputy program manager on the design, launch, and implementation of Idea Hub, et cetera. So she has a broad range of experience and ideally suited to chair this panel. Bethany, thank you.
Happy Friday, everybody. Nice way to end the week. All right, so this is the panel on innovation. I'd asked all of our panelists to preview for me what their core message, what their core theme is. So we're going to have them introduce themselves and preview that core theme for you before we go launch into the presentations. Actually, why don't we do that right now? Anne and Ron, you want to start?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Anne McIntyre-Lahner. I'm an independent consultant. I'm here with Ron Schack from the Charter Oak Group, and our presentation is talking about 5 key elements that we have learned to help sustain a data-informed culture, especially across new administrations.
Great, thank you. Ryan?
She said it.
She said it. She's got it. Ryan and Jenessa.
Good morning. I'm Ryan Hunter, and this is Jenessa Rozier.
And we are from the Controller's Office in the city of San Francisco. So Luke is our colleague, teed us up well yesterday. Thanks, Luke. I manage the City Performance Lean program in our office. So that's kind of our solution to how do we get from sort of performance measurement to actual implementation and results. So we're going to tell you a little bit about how we do that.
Great. And Tim?
Hi, good morning. My name is Tim Dodd. I'm the Chief Performance Officer for the City of Santa Monica, California. And my presentation today really is about recognizing that in most organizations, performance management is a huge culture change. So it's about developing a plan to identify the why, the reasons behind wanting to initiate that change, and developing a roadmap for success to get there.
Great. So, some of you yesterday were in my workshop on value proposition. I do a variety of workshops and trainings and a little bit of facilitation. One of my workshops that I do in various iterations is on storytelling or strategic narrative. And yet I'm the worst in the world. I never actually tell any stories. So I'm going to force myself today to practice on you telling a story. For this conference and this topic on innovation, it's going to be a story about innovation, except that we didn't call it that then, because I'm old, and this was in the early 90s. We just didn't use that word. We were just fixing stuff. We were just finding problems and figuring out how to make them better and to take advantage of the opportunities. So in the cities, in City of Pittsburgh Mayor's office, we were there with a new mayor, Tom Murphy, and he was a community organizer, and I am a community organizer by training and by education. And we had a neighborhood team. And our job was really to engage the neighborhoods in driving the improvement of city services and neighborhood development. So we ran 2 series of neighborhood strategy meetings. And the innovation, again, we didn't call it that, was about transferring some of the responsibility and decision-making out of the city government to the community-based organizations, closer to where they knew what the issues were, they knew what was going on, and they were willing to roll up their sleeves and lend a hand. So that was the grand innovation. We went through all 92 neighborhoods in the city of Pittsburgh in turn and collected data about what was important to them, put it in a database, and then worked with the city teams, whether it was Public Works or Bureau of Building Inspection, to reprioritize what the service schedules look like and what the priorities were. Because you know what? The city folks didn't know better. The community folks knew better. That was our grand innovation, was to actually transfer some of the decision-making and share responsibility for prioritizing routes, prioritizing schedules, and really engaging the community in things like painting playground equipment. I know what you're thinking, that's a union job. Yes, it is, but there were so many playgrounds to be painted, there was no way the city staff would ever be able to keep up with all of that. So we were able to help them learn that sharing the responsibility was a good thing. So we saw all kinds of transformations in the culture, and we got a lot of things done in a very short period of time because we shifted the model. So that's the innovation. That's part 1 of my story. I'll tell part 2 and part 3 later. Storytelling, cliffhanger, right? So as we get started, I'm going to ask Ann and Ron to come up, unless you want to sit there from your seats and do the presentation. That's your choice. While we're getting ready to do that, again, I said I'm a community organizer. It is all about actions. You're going to get great insights and great ideas from all the folks on this panel, but it's not just for information's sake. We want you to do something with it. So I'm going to pass out sticky notes here, and as you hear things that might inspire you to action or to change your thinking on something, I want you to write it down, and by the end of this panel, we're going to put all of these sticky notes up on the wall of the things that you're inspired to take action on. Okay? And am I doing it? Am I doing it? There. Is that the right one? Yep. Awesome. Take it away.
Thank you.
So hello, everyone. I'm Ron Schack, and this is McIntyre-Lahner, and we're talking about throwing babies out with bathwater today. that was something, that was a cool title we thought of, and then we're like, how does that really work with what we're talking about? So we found a way to make it work. Throwing out the baby with the bathwater really is about to lose something valuable when trying to get rid of something unwanted. And I think that's really the theme of what happens often when administrations change. We do a lot of work over the years in developing performance systems and instilling a data culture in our organizations and in our systems, and then the governor changes, or the commissioner of an agency changes. And when this happens, everybody wants to put their stamp on things and make themselves biologically distinctive, right? So unfortunately, that can lead to disruption in some of the processes and some of the methods that agencies and systems use to work on data. So our caution is, you have to recognize that some of that is going to happen, but you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So, yep. So in order not to do that, we have 5 key building blocks that we're going to talk about that are going to both sustain and build a data culture, but then also ensure that that continues in the face of administrative policy or even program changes. Sometimes if your agency operates a big program, like a federal program, changes in that can radically change the way people think about what's being measured. And you have to be prepared for those things. And one of the keys is, of course, involving staff at all levels and involving external stakeholders. We'll talk about this some more, but building external constituencies for the data that you're producing within an organization is one of the key ways of sustaining that production of data. Because if external stakeholders consistently press for those data, it's harder for someone within the organization to just say, oh, don't produce that anymore, right? So we'll talk more about that.
And as you may notice, we have changed from just a bathtub ejecting the baby to a bathtub where we're growing and sustaining culture. So we're going to kind of
She's
go.
a farmer, so
We're going to go back and forth a little bit with our storyline. So the 5 key building blocks that we're going to discuss include demonstrating the value of a data-informed culture internally and externally, permeate and saturating your organization through a number of different ways that we'll talk about, using stealth when necessary. And we both feel it's very important to understand we're talking about the good kind of stealth, like embedding vegetables in the meatloaf to get your children to eat their veggies, making your daily exercise routine fun so that it doesn't feel like work. We are not talking about being dishonest or using a lack of transparency or being sneaky. We're talking about being smart and helpful. We also want to talk about the importance of being flexible and adaptive with your approach, and then being willing to integrate new approaches into your work.
So yesterday we heard all about both the importance and the challenges of developing ROI for analytics and data work. And here in this context, it's incredibly important. You need to be able to answer what's in it for me constantly. And also even multiple times to the same people. Over the years, I've worked with teams of people and organizations where they start off asking that question, and I believe I've answered it, and then the same people will ask that question again 6 months later, a year later, and you're like, didn't we talk about this already? But you have to always be prepared to demonstrate the value of your work. And there's no better way than to have real examples of stuff that has worked, problem solved, outcomes improved, dollars saved. And you have to save up that in an organized kind of archive that you can call on when you get asked these questions, especially by new administrations. Ultimately, too, I think, this whole question of ROI, if we're just collecting information on outcomes and we never figure out a way, I know this is a horrible phrase, but we never figure out how to dollarize those outcomes, we can struggle really making the ultimate case using ROI. So I think that's one of the big challenges we have ahead of us, is to really begin to come up with some standardized ways to dollarize the outcomes we're achieving, especially things like safety outcomes, for example.
So let's talk a little bit about permeating and saturating the agency with data and a data culture. So when we talk about saturating, we're talking about filling something up so that it's all the way full. It can't hold anything more. And that allows us to permeate, which is allow something to pass or trickle through other material and get all the way down. If we're thinking about a garden in the same way that we might think about an agency, if you want your garden or your agency to flourish, you really need to saturate your garden with water and your agency with your data approach, your supports, your tools, everything that people are going to need to do business in the way that you're encouraging them to do so. So you have to include every level of the agency in your saturation and permeation effort. That includes your line staff, it includes your middle managers, it includes your external stakeholders, and it's really important to include technical assistance on an ongoing, helpful, and non-threatening way at every level of the agency. In the same way if you have a parched garden and you get a rainstorm which inundates the garden with water, it doesn't permeate, it doesn't saturate, it runs off. So that if you bombard people with your new data effort and a new way that they must do business, chances are it's going to run off because you've given them too much, too fast, and they're unable to absorb it. Additionally, last year when we were here, Ron and I spoke about data fear and data anxiety, and we've continued to do a lot of work about that. And for those of you who weren't here, I'll just say that you are a very scary bunch. And I mean that in all seriousness. You're data people. You get it. Many, many of your colleagues don't. And in the same way that bombarding a garden with too much water, bombarding a social worker or someone who's not comfortable with data scares the heck out of them, and they will just get, they'll be closed off. So it's by that understanding their concerns, that ongoing support, and allowing people to slowly get it and to understand what's in it for them, that you'll be able to permeate the system.
So now we come to the issue of stealth. And as Ann said earlier, we're not talking about doing anything sneaky or dishonest or non-transparent. But sometimes, it's, I've seen too many measurement efforts start off with a big kickoff party and lots of fanfare and lots of executive support. And then it's like, all of a sudden, what happened to that effort? Where'd it go? Or people think, oh, well, this is, it feels to people like a flavor of the month thing, and they just wait it out and don't worry about it too much. So, and there's nothing wrong with being public about working with data and making sure that the administration, showing all staff that this is serious work and we're serious about it. But it's not the big kickoff party that matters. And it's not, the cool name or branding thing that matters. It is the everyday application of these principles and approaches and methodologies that matter, supported by sort of knowing technical assistance.
It's also important to be flexible and adaptive. So consistency is important, and we've been talking about consistency, and we heard about consistency yesterday. However, rigidity is deadly. Following administrative changes, you need to align and calibrate the indicators, the measures, and the approaches that you're using so that it allows you to incorporate the things that are important to a new administration while conserving and including those things that you and your colleagues may have been working on for a number of years. Ron mentioned earlier the importance of including your external stakeholders. And we have both had the experience of when an agency wanted to make a 90-degree turn and change the data approach or a programmatic approach. It's your external stakeholders, your partners in the work, the people who are impacted by it can stand up and say, not so fast. You've got some good new ideas, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You were doing some important things before, and we want to see you continue to do those. It's important to consider the documents that you're using, your measurement documents, your planning documents, as living documents, because you do need to be able to change them and modify them as a new administration comes in. By using multiple reporting formats and be willing to refresh your approaches, tweak a little here, change a little there, it allows you to keep the momentum going that you've created perhaps under a previous administration.
And I would say one of the most important things is, a name is just a label. Don't be so tied to a particular name for something or a brand that you feel like everything is being thrown out if we change this name for this initiative. Or, again, administrations, new governors like to rebrand things, and it's okay as long as the core of what you're doing is maintained. At the same time, you should be open to new approaches. There's no need to throw out prior good work. But if you were using one approach to continuous improvement, driven by your data and measures, and a new governor comes in and says, we really should be doing lean, well, then why not? Do lean. But the core measurement that drives a lot of that work still exists and is still valid. And as long as you show the new administration that that's true, there shouldn't be a problem. At the same time, don't get stuck on your framework so stuck on your current framework that you lose the value of new approaches. And you can address both popular frameworks and difficult frameworks within a broader umbrella. So I've been thinking about this a little bit, and you have frameworks that are kind of umbrella frameworks like collective impact and results-based accountability. You have other things, other approaches that are really represent the logic or relationship between measures like program logic models and balanced scorecards. And then you have continuous improvement approaches like Lean and Six Sigma and CQI. But really, you could see how all of these could be integrated into one overall. You could be doing RBA, you could be doing balanced scorecards within RBA and doing Lean, right? There's no reason why you can't integrate and borrow from what's important. Okay, and along the same lines as building external constituencies, leveraging external resources is important. Sometimes when a new administration or a new commissioner comes in, measurement isn't the most important thing for them. They might deprioritize and somewhat de-resource some of the measurement. So then your external resources are very important to sustain the efforts. Things like open data portals, where you can take advantage, build constituencies for your organizational data because it's flowing to an open data portal. A peer-to-peer network like our RBA network in Connecticut, where you can actually leverage the peer network for additional technical assistance. The same thing with colleagues in and out of state government, and something like an external data academy like the Connecticut Data Collaborative. So all that stuff is important, especially when suddenly you don't have the same resources you used to within an organization. I want to wrap it up.
So we look forward to answering your questions after everyone else has had a chance to speak, and to talking with any of you later about sustaining the important work that you do across administrations. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I love mixed metaphors.
That's your specialty.
It's fantastic. Jenessa and Ryan, come on up.
Can I turn this guy on? Am I on over here? Hello? Okay. Oh, if I stand there, I'm blinded. Okay, I'm gonna stand up here. Good morning. Well, again, I'm Ryan Hunter. I manage the City Performance Lean Program in the Controller's Office in San Francisco.
And I'm Jenessa Rozier. I'm a performance analyst in the office, and then I support the training coordination for the Lean program.
So I think this is a good lead-in to us, and to think a little bit about how do we actually move from performance management to people really making change. So I want to start here. So we've heard a lot from all of you in the last couple of days about beautiful dashboards, all of your amazing innovation work, performance work, measuring maps. You heard from our colleague Luke yesterday, but I think, is this one of your dashboards, Luke? About all the work that we do to kind of give that important data to departments, to cities, to municipalities. And I have a question for you. So it is, I'm sure, for you always the case that you give people these beautiful products and they react like this, right? They say, thank you for giving me everything I need to transform my organization. Now I can better serve my citizens. I am so relieved that I now have this strategic approach to dealing with data and performance, right? This is everybody's experience? What? Well, you know, sometimes I have this experience instead. That people, you know, we produce the beautiful dashboard and it's not used for decision making. We make recommendations in some report and those recommendations are ignored. Is that some of your experience occasionally? Okay. So the way, so we're very high tech in San Francisco, there's stick figures. So the way I have sometimes seen this go is something like this. We say in our office, hello, we have these beautiful data insights. I have put everything in a dashboard for you. Here's my report with 10 recommendations. And what do you think is sometimes the response to that? This is a real question. I don't have time. What else don't I have? Money. What else? Why else are people not thrilled about my dashboard? Yeah. Look, those are my next 3 things. Look, I have no money, I have no time, I have 10 other things. Good, you guys, the answers I was fishing for, you all had. I appreciate that. Wait, oh, those are mine, this is me. And the thing I really want to highlight is that even when these things are not true, even when the leader of the organization says, yes, this is important and we should work on this, and they're willing to make it a priority, is the leader of the organization the person that actually has to do the change? No. The people who actually have to do the change are the line staff and the middle managers. Those are the people who are actually out there filling the chuck holes. This is an amazing word, by the way. They're the ones plowing the snow and filling the potholes and hiring the staff. And those people are not often a part of this conversation, and they often have other priorities. We heard a little bit in Ron and Ann's presentation about, was it data, fear, and anxiety? And I think that's something that we see a lot, right? What is this? Why are you coming for me? They certainly don't want me from the outside to come in and tell them how to fill a pothole better. So the question that I want to ask us with this, so when we wind up frustrated, is how do we ensure that data and analysis, that all of the beautiful work that we've seen, actually result in a culture of continuous improvement for the organizations we're trying to serve? So our answer to that question is our City Performance Lean program. So we've been operating for about 4 years, and that's our aim. So we're aiming to foster a culture of continuous improvement among civil servants in San Francisco. So we are a capacity building training program, an innovation program, and we train city employees to be champions for change, and then we partner with city departments to make measurable change to KPIs that provide better services for San Franciscans. So we learned a lot from Brian in Denver. I was saying, oh, Brian stole my thunder, but I actually stole the thunder from Brian first, and then so you may hear some resonance with what he talked about yesterday. But this is just some of what we've done in the last few years. So we've trained over 700 staff. We are working with those staff to do small innovations that we call Just Do It's, and then larger A3 projects that we're coaching them on. And then we partner with city departments, so about a dozen city departments. You can see some of the clients that we've worked with here. So I want to come back to my beautiful stick figures and think about how do we actually address this problem. So how do we get here? What do we do? And I think that the key here is the stuff on the left is not the problem, right? We can produce excellent data, excellent reports. The problem isn't we need a more beautiful dashboard. That it's addressing these things on the right. And I think the most important one, and the one I want to talk about now, are these folks, are the line staff and the middle managers. So how do we get those people, the staff at all levels, as Ann and Ron said, how do we get those people to move from being fearful of change and of data and of innovation to actually being champions for that work? So when we did this, we shifted our approach. So what we actually did is we said, you know what, we are going to stop giving solutions. We're going to not do this anymore. Because we realized, first of all, it's a certain amount of hubris for me as outside analyst guy to come in and tell the person who's been working in HR for 20 years how to hire people better. So, part of why sometimes these things aren't implemented is because we have some lovely idea that makes sense on paper, but to the folks that do the work every day, they know something I don't know about why that thing isn't going to work. And part of the insight that I feel like I have had to swallow as a bitter pill is that even if I'm right, even if I do have some insight, if these people on the front line and in the middle management don't see it, don't agree with it, don't care, or worse, view me as some kind of threat to their job, they are going to ignore it or resist it. So now, when I meet with a new project sponsor about doing this work with them, I tell them, here are things that my team is not ever going to do. We are not ever going to write you a report. We are not going to solve your problem. I am not going to give you a recommendation. I'm like the anti-consultant for these folks. So what do we do instead? So, okay, we haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater. We do still work with folks on data. We do still talk to them about what are your goals, how are you measuring those goals, Let's make sure that that stays at the forefront of your mind. But after that, we don't tell them how to solve their problem. We give tools. And we train line staff and coach them through problem solving. So I don't give solutions. I teach people to problem solve. Because we say, you are going to solve your own problem. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is that the people who do the work are the experts in that work, and the solutions need to come from them. So if we want, as Ron and Ann said, this improvement work to be more than the flavor of the month, it needs to be built into the fabric of the organization such that the people who actually do that work every day are the ones championing it, because I will leave at some point. And what we want is for those people to carry it forward. They don't need me to save the day as the outside expert. They need to be empowered to think about their work differently and change, and be given permission to change. So we're the experts at dashboarding, at facilitating problem solving, but our clients are the experts at health benefits administration or at carpentry, right? So we keep that role delineation. So I could run an entire conference about all of the things that we do to do this, but I'm going to let Jenessa talk to you about just some of the tools that we use to actually facilitate that kind of change.
Right. Thank you.
You want this?
That's fine. Okay, so as Ryan mentioned, our goal is to really enlist frontline staff to become problem solvers. And how we do this is we try to shift that responsibility for decision-making down the org chart, right? So we're not going to solve the problem for them. We're going to teach them the tools so that they can come to the solution themselves. So the way in which we do this is we follow a few principles, which I will go over. Oops. Okay, so first, a principle that we like to follow. We make the staff do the analysis themselves. So we get the team together, we process map collaboratively, they're using sticky notes and butcher paper, they're doing root cause analyses, all of these things they're doing themselves, right? So we're teaching hands-on, and we're giving them the ownership to create maps that they own. So the important thing to note about this is all of their analyses, all of these process maps are not in my handwriting, it's in theirs. The next thing that we do is we teach, we coach instead of telling or directing. So these pictures are from our Lean Leaders training, and we develop our trainees as problem solvers by requiring them to bring an actual work-related process problem to the training with them so that they can learn the Lean tools and be working on this project simultaneously. So in this training, we try to challenge their critical thinking. And our coaching style is not meant to find the answer for them, but it's really about asking the right questions so that they can arrive at the answer themselves. And we specifically tell them, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to keep asking you questions to guide your decision-making so that you can make the decision. So we make metrics matter to the frontline staff, and we do this through running huddles on a daily basis or a regular basis. And these huddles provide a venue to empower them to think strategically about improvements regularly. So they're encouraged to come up with small innovation ideas and see directly how those innovations are tied to the overall strategic goals, and which are written on the board. So as Ryan mentioned, we work with them to develop those KPIs. What are those metrics that are going to matter? And we put them face to face with those metrics every day. So they're engaging with this board directly, again, by hand, and tracking in real time the movement on the metrics that they are tracking for their improvements. We're asking them to measure something every day, again, bringing them face to face with metrics. So once they've implemented their solutions, staff can manually update the trackers, allowing them to see directly the impact of their work. So how many of us enjoy making checklists? Yeah. How many of you enjoy making checklists for the mere enjoyment of the checking off of the box once you're done? Right, yes. So if you're like me, there's nothing quite like that meaningful feeling of accomplishment when you've completed something. And even better when you can see how that accomplishment is then impacted into the overall strategic goals, right? So in many ways, that's what these manual trackers on metrics are doing. We're honing in on that feeling of accomplishment and seeing the immediate result, ultimately engaging staff on a deeper level. So lastly, and this one's tough, we help managers give away control. So shocking, I know, right? Because it's hard for us, especially as analysts. We want to be the ones to solve the problem, right? It's what we're used to. But we've learned that in order for this work to sustain, management must give responsibility and control to their staff and allow staff to tell them what they need to move things forward. We even designed a training for managers so that, we have 1 minute, we gotta wrap this up. We designed a training for managers to help guide them to give control away because we understand that the desire to drive improvement from the outside is so strong. So this means that in this environment, problems are sought after and viewed as opportunities for growth. Managers are empowering staff so that they feel supported and held accountable for the improvements that they suggest and implement. So we're numbers people, so we're gonna give you some numbers. Here's some results that we've seen from the things that we've accomplished. So first, we've helped our Public Utilities Commission reduce their time to hire from 9 months to 5 months. Our Municipal Transit Agency increased the understanding of their public hearing notices from 66% to 83%. And our folks with Rec and Park, we worked with the Structural Maintenance Yard, which is a division of about 150 skilled tradespeople who help maintain the city's parks, and we helped them clear out 75 tons of unwanted, unused materials that were outdated or broken. So we're really proud of these accomplishments, and these numbers are great, but this isn't the thing that we're most proud of. I want to tell you a very quick story. So again, with the Structural Maintenance Yard, we engaged with a partnership with them and helped them navigate through a large 5S project, which is about clearing up their shop spaces and improving flow. So what was not in our scope, and what you see here, is a section of space called the Boneyard, and it served as a storage space for big disused items that they didn't know what to do with. So after our project ended, the folks at the yard wanted to keep the momentum of our project going, so they created a lean coalition comprised of staff responsible to do just that. The Boneyard was one of those efforts. So we just happened to poke around the internet, found some satellite images of San Francisco, and we saw this picture from 2017, and this was taken in the middle of our project with them. This picture was from a year later. They did this work after we left. They gained 10,000 square feet of reusable space after we were gone. So we could tell visually that they cared about their work, so much so that you can see this impact from space. So I'll leave you with this question, and feel free to use your Post-its. What can you do to make managers and frontline staff care about performance measures? Thank you.
Sticky notes, that's why I've got them. Thank you very much. Capability building and coaching. I am a coach myself, so I appreciate that. And giving away control. It's the new C's, Forrest. You're gonna have to get rid of those others. Tim, take it away.
All right, great. Good morning, everyone. So how many of you have ever had to do an Ignite presentation or done one? Okay, so I actually took the Peak Academy class this summer and had to do one for that. And so what I really found about doing that is that I'm not quite good enough at them yet. I really want to be able to do them well. But I did pull a few elements from that into this presentation to basically kind of help to set the stage of what I'm going to be talking about and providing the context. So I've been with the city of Santa Monica for about 2.5 years. I serve as their Chief Performance Officer. And really, the presentation today is going to be about a common sense approach to basically developing an implementation plan for performance management. So it's not rocket science. It's really, I don't think I'm going to be talking about anything that's particularly, there may be a few wows in the room, but I think most of what I'm going to be talking about is really more about how do we pull things together. I do have a few handouts. Unfortunately, I did not bring enough for the room, so I do have them at my desk. Happy to give them to you, and then I do have my contact information at the end. So the two parts I'm going to be focusing on today are really kind of setting the stage of what it is we're doing in the city, and then after we've given you that context, talk about the plan that we've implemented and how we're doing it. So this is just a little bit about me. I think one thing that's really important to point out is I don't have any private sector experience. My first love is government. Performance management is my second love. And so really, I knew I wanted to go into government. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And so about 8 years ago, working actually here, so I'm actually from Boston, even though I live in California now. Yeah, I actually miss it a lot. I mean, the weather is pretty amazing where I am, but I do get very nostalgic when I come back. So I came into this really knowing a lot more about government than I did about performance management. But when I discovered performance management, I realized that it was a way of matching my skills and my interest with why I believed in government and the good that it can do in people's lives. So I have, again, I've served in a local elected office. I worked for 4 years here for the state of Massachusetts as the director of performance management. After the end of the administration that I worked for, I moved to Baltimore, worked for the city there for 2 years, and now I've been in California since 2017. So these are just a few quotes that I think, oddly enough, there are a fair amount of performance management quotes floating around on the internet, but I think it really is important. I like looking at quotes quite often to basically help kind of figure out and conceptualize some of the things that I want to think about and I want to do better. So just to kind of set the stage, how many of you have had a chance to visit Santa Monica before? It's a great place, right? It's a very unique place. We're only about 93,000 residents that live there. During the day, though, we swell to at least 250,000 people. A lot of days it's more than that. We're nestled right next to LA. We are a full-service city, so coming from the East Coast and not really having county governments here in Massachusetts, I wasn't really used to the fact that there are cities on the West Coast that they're incorporated, but they don't necessarily do a lot as a city. They contract out. At Santa Monica, really, the health department is the only thing we contract out. Everything else we do internally. We do have a city manager, city council form of government. For a city our size, we do have what I would consider to be a very large budget, and we do use a 2-year budget cycle, which is important for when I start talking about how we're doing performance-based budgeting. So this is my team and I. We're obviously a small but mighty group. Why is this slide here? The importance of this slide is basically to show you the importance of teamwork in doing this work, but also some of you are doing this by yourselves as the main coordinator. Some of you have a small team, some of you have a large team, but the reality is regardless of how big the team is that's actually coordinating the work, if you don't have a team across the organization, if you don't have stakeholders who are engaged, if you don't have champions who are doing their day job but also bought into performance management, this work is never going to work and it's never going to get off the ground. And so even though we're a small group, we're probably never going to grow much beyond 3 people. It's really important that we do have performance liaisons in every department and we do have champions because long after we're gone, we obviously, as talked about by the previous presenters, want this to be something that becomes part of the culture, which is what I'll be presenting about today. So this is just an introductory slide to the few elements I'll be talking about of things that we do in the city of Santa Monica, which again are helpful to providing context. This is actually not the Trivial Pursuit wheel, although it does look quite like that. In Santa Monica, one of our biggest challenges is we try to be all things to all people. Obviously, as you know, a lot of cities or a lot of organizations that do this work, they'll identify we want to be the most business-friendly city. We want to be the most child-friendly city, the city that's known for parks. In Santa Monica, we want to be known in a lot of different ways, which is obviously a huge challenge for doing this kind of work. And so this wheel essentially represents all the things that we're working on. So the biggest difference, and I think we would probably all agree with this, between doing this work in the public versus private sector is we don't have the same bottom line. So the effort of this wheel is to identify what are our bottom lines as a city. So the interior of the wheel, those are our 7 bottom lines. Those are the 7 themes, the 7 outcomes, the 7 reasons why we exist as a city. I can talk more at the break extensively with any of you if you have questions about how we came to this, but we came to this over about 5 years of doing extensive research. We received $1 million from the Bloomberg Philanthropies to do a well-being index. We've done a lot of survey work, and that was how we worked with the community to identify these 7 outcomes, these 7 themes. We are also in the process of creating a performance advisory committee that engages residents and other community members in helping to identify what's important to the community. The outer ring identifies work streams. Really, these are the areas that we focus on. There's about 27 of them that help us define these areas in greater detail. That's where the outcome metrics are. So we've talked a lot today and yesterday about the different metric hierarchy. We have developed somewhat of a strict hierarchy where we have inputs, right, tracking how many we're doing of things. Those are done internally in divisions and departments. As part of our performance-based budget, we track outputs, how well are we doing things, and then the framework, this wheel, which is our strategic plan, we have metrics that track, are people better off because of what we did and how we did it. The things that are in a darker shade, those were identified by the City Council as our priorities. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We do have a performance-based budget, so what we're really trying to do is mapping. We're trying to create a system that's cascaded. We're trying to identify every single thing we do as a city. I really call this 2-year budget cycle our inventory year. So we work with departments to develop a list. We are doing performance-based budget. However, we are not doing program-based budgeting. Also a long story I can talk about more in detail later. And so we are still using the current structure of how our budget and our departments are structured. But this map basically shows the outcome from our strategic plan, from our framework, the sub-outcome, which is the work stream, the division the work is a part of, the service, the activity, which is really synonymous with the program, and then the metric for each. These are primarily output metrics. These are right now being tracked. They're reported on a quarterly basis, and they're tracked internally. Training is obviously a huge part of this. We have a training program that's trained about 11% of our workforce. It's obviously something that's really important to what we're doing, and again, trying to build interest and stakeholder engagement across the organization. We also do have a samostat process that you've heard a lot about, again, in terms of being based on CopStat in New York, CityStat in Baltimore. Somerstat obviously has been around for a long time here in Massachusetts. It's really our process of monitoring our work and making sure we're staying on track with what we're trying to achieve. We do have a dashboard, which is how we show what we're doing to the community. We do have an open data portal as well. But this basically is a way that you can look at our high level, are people better off, outcome type metrics. Poor Ned Stark, although of course this is when he was in Lord of the Rings. I think this slide is important though because you can't just wish something and make it so, right? Doing this kind of work, again, first and foremost, is a culture change. Yes, we all have data backgrounds. We all can do analytics. Obviously, that's important to doing this kind of work. But I think in the public sector, I feel like that's about 20% of the job, maybe 30%, and 70 or 80% is managing the culture change. Working with stakeholders, trying to identify the why behind what we're doing, and trying to move forward together. So the purpose of why we developed this plan, this 5-year plan that I'll talk about now, so I just finished kind of setting the stage for you. We wanted a no surprises approach. We have a lot of change fatigue in our organization. We have a lot of people that are really, to be honest, frustrated with some changes and some things and how they've gone. And so we really wanted to say, guess what? We're not going to be surprising you with an ask. We're telling you a few years in advance what the ask is going to be in March of 2021 because we really want to make sure we're working together on this. We are working to get engagement at all levels of the organization. As I mentioned previously, we have a city manager form of government, so really the city council is our policy setting board, and it's the city manager's job and his staff's job to basically implement that. So the city council actually spent a good 25 minutes deliberating the development of this policy. The one that I presented to them was a lot longer. They actually did a way better job than I did in terms of being succinct, but it is, I think, really important. You could say it's checking off the box kind of activity, but I really think it's important because this is the city council, 7 elected representatives of the city identifying how we're going to do performance management and why it's important to them. The plan is organized around 8 key strategies. So these are basically the things that kind of structure the plan. These are the strategies that we've identified that are going to help us get to our purpose, which is a data-driven culture. So the reason why I believe developing a plan like this is important is because you want to know the why. Again, in the business world, and I'm simplifying greatly so I understand that, right, it's driven by the bottom line, right? Obviously, businesses want to be good corporate neighbors. They want to be good partners. They want to be, in a lot of cases, not always, but in a lot of cases, good stewards of the environment. But at the end of the day, right, the bottom line is what drives their decisions, right? It's what makes, McDonald's decide that they're going to, using analytics to decide they're going to sell and have ready a certain number of chicken patties in one market and hamburgers in another. Governments don't necessarily think that way, right? But we need to think about what is our why. And in every city, the why is different. Maybe our goal is to stretch taxpayer dollars as far as possible, and our why is to focus on operations. Maybe our why is to focus on working with community partners to achieve outcomes. But whatever that why is, if you don't define what the why is first, I think it's like that old Alice in Wonderland quote, right, where Alice meets the Cheshire Cat, right? If you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to know where you want to go before you develop the plan. So the 8 strategies focus on Each of the strategies has a purpose. What are we doing? A summary about what have we done, why is this important, and measures of success, of course, and then a work plan to get it done. So the 8 strategies, so SAMOSAT helps us manage and monitor our progress. The framework is our strategic plan. It provides the overall direction. The priority development, again, this is a subset of our structure, which helps us identify what our priorities are. Engage in external stakeholders. Of the 8 strategies, I would honestly say this is the weakest right now, and it's the one I'm devoting a lot of my time to improving. Again, one of the ways we're doing that is creating a performance advisory committee that engages stakeholders. Engaging internal stakeholders, this is primarily through our training program. Performance-based budgeting is, again, one way we're trying to build sustainability and trying to build organizational structure around this. Communication is huge. One of my closest work colleagues and friends is our chief communications officer, because how we message this both externally and internally is incredibly important. This is work that's sometimes hard, or I would say almost always hard to explain to folks. And so having graphic images and having a way of explaining it is incredibly important. And then finally, internal consulting. This is an area that we really want to build on. We are working towards doing more performance improvement now that we have created a strategic plan and a performance-based budget, and we have about 401 unique measures across the organization. We really want to use things like lean as strategies, as interventions, if we're not meeting a target Y, and then to use those processes to get there. We developed this around 4 parts of a performance management cycle. These are really basic project management strategies or ideas, but the idea is that it's really important to not forget any of these. It's important to strategize, develop, implement, and then you're never ending, right? You're always monitoring and always working to improve. So just as a quick example, I'm going to take from the plan our SAMOSAT program. So this identifies what the purpose is, the outcome. Right now it's an outcome statement. Over time, we would develop this into an outcome metric. And then what are our outputs? What are the things that we're going to be using to monitor whether or not we're getting there? This will take you through 3 years. So the plan is a 5-year plan. We're 2.5 years in. So basically, this is what the plan looks like. This is what the work plan part, I should say, looks like. So for each year, we've mapped out what the key milestones, the key things we're going to be working on. It's color-coded based on the months of the year that we're going to be working on it, and based on the phase of the performance management cycle that we're going to be focused on during that time. This is the current year that we're working on right now, so we basically have been working to kind of shift the model of SAMOSAT and working to implement it. You can't actually see it because of the way I use colors. As you can probably tell, I moonlight as a graphic designer. I don't, obviously. But the first 5 months are actually shaded in black. So these are things we're working to implement right now. Then this is what we want to do next year. And again, this plan is a 5-year plan, so it goes 1 year past what this year is. Celebrating success is something I think that we don't do enough of. It's one of the cornerstones of performance management. Elaine, who's in the middle here, was a former longtime city employee and assistant city manager. When she retired about 2 years ago, we created an award in her name, and we use it to recognize employees, and we do that as part of the SAMOSAT process as well. Using the plan is critically important. This is a whiteboard wall in my office. So we use it, my team uses it to monitor how well we're doing and to make sure we're on track to do the deliverables that are in the plan. Every year we'll update the city council on it, and then quarterly we meet with the department heads and present them an update on the plan as well. 4 of my favorite presidents from TV shows. Maybe some of them are, some of them not so much, maybe anywhere. But definitely, I've already personally gotten and besides being able to see my mom and friends and come back to the city that I love, I've had an opportunity to meet and talk to a lot of you, and I've really gotten a lot out of this conference. And so I always appreciate the opportunity to stay in touch with people that I meet at these conferences. And thank you again for your time today.
Thank you very much to our entire panel. Thank you, thank you. And it's sticky note time. Do you want part 2 of my story? Somebody's got to write a few things on those sticky notes. I know that something inspired you. There's one small thing that you can do, right? We heard from Brian, incremental change is great. What's one thing you can do in the next 2 weeks to get something started? So part 2 of my story, it really is reflective of so many of the things that folks said. We didn't just magically transfer control from the city, right, to the community-based groups. There was huge resistance, and not just from unions, from the attorneys, from obviously the managers themselves, who were saying, This is our job. We are the experts. We know how to do this. But again, the innovation part was, well, you're running a 1950s government, and this was just the 90s then, but people want to be involved. People want to help drive their own future. We got to figure out how to share some of the responsibility, and you can't know everything unless you ask them. And that's what that 2 rounds of neighborhood strategy meetings was all about. And again, we collected data. I built a database 3 times because I didn't get it right the first or the second time. But now we had a database that actually tracked a variety of city complaints because our mayor service center sucked. So we took that database, and so this is about part 2 of the story of once you have an innovation, what it can lead to once you get started with the fixing of the immediate things. Now you're creating a foundation for more things to happen that you didn't even anticipate. So we were able to completely revamp the Mayor's Service Center. We did actually spend a little bit of money and put an IT system in place to actually track complaints and have them actually routed, this was the early 90s, remember, routed to the city departments. City departments said, that's great, now we're getting all these complaints, we can't respond to this. We said, well, what would make it easier for you to respond to all these complaints? We want you to be response-based. In addition to being proactive by setting the new priorities with the communities. They said, well, all these complaints come in and we don't have enough information, and then we have to go and do that checking. I said, well, let's create a guide. We called it the Key to the City. It was a guide. It was a physical piece of paper. We also put it on the website. It said, if you have a complaint about an abandoned car, here's the information you need when you call in so that we can actually take action on it. If you don't give us this information, it's going to sit in the queue for a while until we send somebody out there to go collect the information. But if you provide this information in this format, and here's how you can do it into the Mayor's Service Center, now we can address it more quickly. Information and instruction was the key to the city and our engagement from our community. We revamped the city's service center, Mayor's Service Center. One of the other major things that happened as a result of collecting that data and having analyses and doing those neighborhood strategy meetings was we sent out postcards to everybody saying, we're coming to your neighborhood, here's what we're going to talk about, the mayor's going to be there. And then we got hundreds and thousands of cards back, invalid address, invalid address, invalid address. They all came back in. And the city, I took them all to the city planning department. We said, we got some bad addresses. They like, I don't have the staff to deal with that. And they started to throw them away. I said, that's data. Like, these are things that aren't working. Those are data points. We're saving all of them. He's like, I still don't have time to deal with that. I said, if I get you a couple interns for a summer, can we do something about this? It's like, yeah, we might be able to do something with this. We updated all of the addresses in the city of Pittsburgh, which helped Treasury for tax collection, right? It helped a variety, those kind of adjacent applications that Brian talked about yesterday. We had all kinds of other applications for that. One of them being updating our entire GIS in the city of Pittsburgh. And turns out there was a long history between the city and county of the city and county not cooperating. That never happens, does it? But our EMS was not on the same page because addresses for the city were looked at differently than the way the county entered their addresses. So we had EMS response systems that couldn't talk to each other, right? Because they just couldn't get together on the definitions, didn't want to. So that became my job. We're collaboration, right? Oh no, we're gonna fix this. So we took all those data addresses, we got them all cleaned up, we got the city and the county to start talking to each other. And I'm gonna save part 3 for the end. Let's do questions. There is a part 3 to the story. But it is question time for our panel. Who's got questions for the panel? Yes, thank you. Who's first? Here, yes, there, wherever you can get to first.
Thank you. I'm curious, with respect to the initiatives that you've put in place in various different departments, have you seen any of them actually apply what they've learned, not as a continuation of a project that you've worked on, but an entirely new project without your support?
Yes. Yeah, I think we've seen that. I mean, one of the things that's nice about having our Lean Leaders training, so this Jenessa mentioned is our sort of premier training mode where we get people to come and bring a project in hand. It's been great to see folks that we've worked with send whoever their kind of rising star staff back to our training with a new project in hand. So we've actually had a kind of a series of projects from the MTA that we've done a number with their communications group, and they've sort of got the taste of this and want to keep doing it. And several of the partnerships that you heard about, we're launching our fall training cohort right now. So there's an electrician from the structural maintenance yard who's coming and bringing a new project related to that work. We're just concluding our time to hire partnership with the PUC that Jenessa mentioned. One of their HR analysts is coming with a new, an entirely unrelated process about offboarding. So it's nice that we have that resource where people don't have to just do it from scratch. They can come and get this coaching support from us, but it's really at their initiative. I don't know if you have anything you would add.
Thank you. Just a follow-on question. So one of the challenges that can be when you're trying to train a group of staff not familiar with the tool is the jargon, the lexicon, and that thing. How are you approaching that issue when you're reaching down to the staff level? You're not teaching them, you don't have to teach them the jargon and the technical aspects. So can you explain about how you're actually then using the framework, but in an accessible way to staff?
Go ahead.
So I will say that in the very beginning of our training, we specifically say, lean comes with a lot of jargon. It comes from Japan. There's also a lot of Japanese words. We've done a lot of work to remove that language and still teach the concepts behind them and make it very, plain and easy to understand. And I think Denver, who we were trained with, does a lot of work around that as well. And I think we even took it a step further to really try to find ways to make it accessible. Because I think when you start throwing jargony words at folks, they shut down. And so we've done a lot of work to remove that barrier so that it's easy for them to understand and grasp. And we tell them, we don't care necessarily the words that you're using. We just care about how you're thinking about your problem. We want you to critically assess your problem. Right.
Yeah. I mean, when people come into our Lean Leaders training, we coach them through developing an A3, which is, I don't know how lean familiar you all are, but it's a big intimidating piece of paper that's like where your project, your improvement project lives. And I think early on people would get really freaked out about I have to fill out all of these boxes appropriately. And we do want them to use this as a tool. But what we tell them early on is like, look, all this is the whole thing. This is the whole kit and caboodle. It's just, can you think carefully about what problem you're trying to solve? And then how you're going to measure that. Like, how do you know what's going on now, and how do you know if it's going to get better in the future? And then think carefully about why that's happening, and don't just take your first, the first pass at what's going on, but do root cause analysis. And then come up with things that are going to address not the symptom, but that root cause that you found, and workshop them with people until you get agreement about what you should do, and then measure it to make sure it happened. Like that's all of those different performance methodologies that you had up on the screen. They're all that. So then we teach tools and we teach some concepts, but they're just all in service of like, can you have a sort of systematic approach to thinking through a problem?
So there we go. There's a question.
I like the idea of bringing it down to the worker level on asking them where they think the changes need to be made. And I recently joined a new organization, and that was one of the first things I did was interview all my people to say, where do you think the change needs to be made? And about 70% had great ideas. The other 30% said absolutely nothing. Everything's perfect. We don't need to make any change. How do you deal with those types of individuals that just don't see a need to make any change?
Change is really hard, and it's really scary for a lot of people. And so helping people understand what the benefits might be. What is it that we're really trying to achieve? And then taking an honest look at, based on what we're currently doing, are we achieving what you want to achieve, what you got into this work for? You know, when I first took a large state agency through a change process, it was new, young workers and contracted providers who were all in. They got it because they saw the problems in a larger agency. And it was middle managers and sometimes higher level managers who had been reinforced for many years at doing same old, and getting really good at same old. So that was very safe and secure for them. They were the hardest ones. They were a large part of the 30%, at least in my experience. And helping them get back to what they were in the work for and making it personal for them has been useful for me. What's that?
I mean, I think my short answer is how to help those, or what to do with those 30% is that I don't. Or if I go into an organization and 70% of the people are excited about changing, like, that's great. I'm gonna spend my time with that 70% of folks. And I think we do really find that that's true. I think it is 100% of the time, once we sort of open up the question to line staff and middle managers about what do you think should change, there's people who are there waiting for somebody to ask them that, because they're not, they do the work every day, but if they don't think of themselves, if they think my job is to turn the crank, my job is to plow snow, or my job is to fix this play structure, they're not thinking my job is to think about how I fix this play structure or how I plow the snow. And if you just create a space where you ask them that question, not 100% of them, but lots of them have things to say about it. And that's part of the secret is if you just ask them, what do you think? And then say, okay, go do that thing. I guarantee there's a set of people in your organization who will just say, oh, I can rewrite that form? Like, I didn't know I could rewrite that form. And they'll get excited about it and run with it. And you work with those people first. And the 30% of folks, if you can get the 70% of folks really doing that work, you don't have to worry about the other 30%. Like, they will come along for the ride.
I think sometimes you can also, some of the 30% of the recalcitrant people are people who have been in the organization a long time. They have long institutional memories. They've seen improvement efforts come and go. And a lot of times they've seen things tried before, things that are maybe coming up as new ideas to be tried. So to the extent that you can reorient them and have them begin to offer that experience and institutional memory to the improvement effort, the more likely they're going to be engaged. If you just think of them as a curmudgeon and somebody who's just not engaged, that's not going to work very well.
Well, and I think I'll add to that. I think it is always true in the organizations we work with that there are people who are just waiting to be given permission to change and people who don't want to. And I find that the leadership that we work with is actually not great at knowing which one of those groups is which. Exactly. Because there are people who have been doing the thing for 20 years and had an idea 10 years ago and somebody shut them down. And so they're not gonna have an idea again. But if you can actually create a space where it's like, no, you can have an idea and then I'm gonna give you the time and the resources to go and do it. Sometimes it's those 20-year curmudgeons that actually wind up being the champions for change.
Awesome. Thank you so much. On that theme of engagement, we are actually out of time, but hopefully all the panel can stay for a few minutes afterward when we take our break if you have more questions. So I'm going to tell the final chapter in my very, very truncated story, and it really kicks off with a review, right? And it is about that engagement. It's about inviting people into the problem identification, inviting people into the problem solving. This is where the innovation starts. You don't have all the grand ideas. Even if you do, it doesn't matter. Implementation won't happen without you engaging other people in that process. That was my chapter 1 of the story. Chapter 2 of the story was about all of the kind of unintended positive things that came after that you didn't even plan for. Why? Because you got things started and you engaged people, and then they had the bug, right? They had the bug to, oh, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought. I can do some more things, and we built more projects. We built more solutions out of it that we didn't even plan for. So fast forward, chapter 3 of my story, and the reason I really, really want folks to write something on that sticky note. Why? So you just get started, right? Just get something started, because you don't know what it can lead to. Fast forward, that was my city life in the mayor's office of the city of Pittsburgh. I'm now with the federal government, General Services Administration. I did a 6-month assignment with the Technology and Transformation Service on the Centers of Excellence, all about IT modernization. I met someone there who was one of the leads on data analytics. Happened to go to Carnegie Mellon University, which was right up the street from my alma mater, which is the University of Pittsburgh. And he said, oh gosh, Pittsburgh has such great data. The structure of the data is so great and it's so clean, and they're really on top of it. We were able to do such great projects partnering with the city and even the county. And I thought, and I looked at him, and he was young, and he's assertive and has great ideas. And I looked at him after he told all these stories, and I said, you're welcome. So you don't know what it will lead to. You don't know what kind of opportunities you're going to create. Focus on the immediate. Fix the problems. But as you start getting that ball rolling, it's going to lead to all kinds of things you may or may not ever know about. But just get started. So thank you, panelists, for giving us ways to get started.
I still want to see everybody's Post-it notes. Are you going to put them on the wall somewhere?
I was hoping do we have like 2 minutes for like a little popcorn session? Little pop-up, right? Stand up with your sticky note and say, I am going to, and just say what it is. Man, we're going to do 5 of them. Who's first? I am going to. Come on, somebody. I'm going to create an archive of stories that demonstrate value. Woohoo! I love it. Yes. Oh, okay, Boris first, because you stood up first. Go.
I'm going to tell my story much better.
Oh, yay, more stories. Excellent. Here, yes.
Not give people solutions, give them the tools.
I love it. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Explore ways to help management give away or share control or leadership.
Love it. Love it. That's a huge shift. One more. There we go.
Update my 5-year performance plan and revise our goals.
Excellent. If you leave those sticky notes on the table, I'm going to collect them to break. I'm going to put them on the wall. We're going to take a picture of it, and I'm going to send it to Mallory, and it'll be an archive of this conference. And so when you come back next year, we're going to see how many of those things I've done. Thank you very much.